Welcome back to Sci-Fi Humanity, where we uncover the fascinating and often terrifying truths of the galaxy. In today's episode, we're diving into why Earth is classified as a Class 13 death world. Join us as we follow Aleks, a civilian advisor specializing in terraforming, as he reveals the harsh realities and incredible resilience of humanity's home planet. Let's explore the extraordinary and deadly nature of Earth together. Aleks, a civilian advisor for a corporation specializing in terraforming habitat, construction, biospheres, and life support systems, found himself seated in a conference room. His team was supposed to be finalizing the development stages of their latest project. He glanced at his supervisor, and the frankly absurd number of restrictions and specifications listed on the holographic display they were reviewing. He considered speaking up, but thought better of it. The Tsar-Tani looked stressed enough with the listed designs, and Aleks didn't want to exacerbate the situation. Aleks had been with this particular company for several years as their civilian advisor. He contributed to more than a dozen biospheres, nature habitats, and other terraforming projects. Why they kept him on staff had long since become one of the many questions he found himself pondering almost daily. The last time they'd asked for his input on anything significant, or on an important aspect of a project, was during the construction of a Class 7 biosphere primarily intended for human occupation. But since then, the most they'd requested of him was whether a non-sapient species they planned to introduce was adorable, and the potential ramifications thereof. He wasn't complaining, honestly. It was a comfortable job that paid well. He didn't need to do much. And as rare as the call for his expertise was, they did seem to genuinely consider his input when it was given. Today, they were working on something extraordinary. A Class 10 biosphere was being constructed to be used as a military training field. It was an exciting and nerve-wracking project for most of his colleagues, but honestly, he felt their designs were a bit too mild. The weather would be varied, sure, but even the fastest wind setting was only set to 50 units per second, approximately 45 miles per hour, no worse than kite-flying weather in his opinion, unless they included hail in the mix, which of course they did not like. Rain would be the worst, and at exact specified intervals no less. The ground would quake occasionally, but again, the setting was so low that the most it would do is knock some objects off tables, or cause mild disorientation at worst. The artificial gravity was set to 1.33 times the galactic standard, approximately 8.1 ms2. This was close to the very lowest of what is classified as high gravity at 1.3 or ATMs, to apparently 1.33 was the highest dissolve, and he were willing to endure even if it was for training meant to increase their chances of survival when stranded on a potentially high-gravity world. The temperature was set to range from -10 Celsius for 1/10 of a cycle to 35-40 Celsius for another 210ths of a cycle, which was basically the same as living in the Pacific Northwest on Terra. And the predators they planned for populating it were, for lack of a better word, cute. Sure, you wouldn't want to find yourself naked and unarmed in their hunting grounds, but even just casually clothed and holding a good sturdy stick or rock, he'd call the encounter at worst equivalent to wrestling with a slightly large angry cat. Exactly why the Tsar thought he had considered them legitimate threats was honestly very confusing, considering that Tsar Ethan, his large size like underarms, and their jaws being capable of chewing through tree bark like carrots. Also, the fact they were armed to the mandibles with plasma rifles and taser weaponry. After watching the leader of this project lower the artificial gravity setting again for the 5th time since they'd started the meeting, Aleks finally couldn't hold back. This biosphere was being built for survival training, and as far as he was concerned, the current designs not only barely qualified as Class 10, but even Class 9 was starting to look more deadly than what they were building. Aleks, lead engineer Chris Teig. I would like to make a few suggestions. Chris Teig jerked one of their compound eyes towards Aleks and looked as if they were holding back one of their sights from lashing out at his sudden audible presence. The stress from the project was clearly getting to Chris Teig. They had been up close and personal with the environment on far more occasions than they'd liked, and had almost been jumped by one of those big cats when it was being reviewed as a potential threat for populating the biosphere. Chris Tick, you may speak. Aleks, I would suggest at least 2 additional predators be added to the ecosystem, and that you introduce at least 2 more omnivorous species, with at least one being capable of flight. The system as it stands is barely qualified to be considered Class 10 as it is. The wildlife the soldiers would meet on a real Deathworld would be far deadlier than this bikie, far deadlier than any you've introduced so far. Also, the weather needs altering as well. As it stands, the wind and rain will only pose minor danger due to wind chill, but you've set it such that the winds will die out before the cold season, and be at their height during the dry season, which would only make the heat more tolerable, thus removing the point of the training grounds in that regard. If this is to be used as a military training facility, the soldiers need to face a true Class 10 environment. I personally would consider what we've built as Class 9 at its worst, Class 8 at its best. Also, the Chris Tick, I do not think you qualify to dictate to me what a Class 8 environment entails. Civil consultant Aleks, I have designed countless biospheres and station life support systems, and I believe I am well equipped to tell when an ecosystem is or is not dangerous to its inhabitants. I will consider your suggestions, but I believe my designs to be optimal for their intended purpose. Aleks, I do not question your qualifications, nor your familiarity with Class 9 and below ecosystems, but I believe I am more than qualified to speak on Class 10 and above. You know the world my species came from. As the design stands, it would be easier to send the troops to one of the many wildlife reserves on my home world. What you have built resembles what I frequent to an uncanny degree. Chris Tick made a gesture with one of his many cite the limbs that Aleks knew to be a gesture similar to giving him the finger before scuttling out of the conference room, clearly unwilling to listen to him any further. Lead biologist then began making sounds akin to that of drawing nails across a chalkboard, which Aleks knew as her race is equivalent of laughter. Then do not mind Chris Tick. He is still salty over the incident with the what did you call it again? Big cat. Aleks, yes. The creature very much resembled a fully day called a bobcat from my home world, though with far fewer teeth. When the Nirala are considered one of the top predators on the Sarthani homeworld. Also, one of the few things that can coax them into making the R sound, as it's normally reserved for use in respectful dialect only. Aleks, it's a big fluffy kitten at worst. And could you believe that guy? Look at this 1.3 to gravity. To see even realize how low that is considered among Deathworld's most don't go below 1.35. And he expects this crap to fly for a military training facility. I pity the trainees that leave this facility, and not much to do with Chris Tick doesn't agree. Is it true? Your home world has a valley where temperatures reach over 55 Celsius. Aleks, you mean Death Valley? Yes, the record is actually over 60 Celsius now, and it even goes below -9 Celsius at some points in the cycle. Even fascinating. No wonder your home world is Class 12 if temperatures can swing that much each cycle. And is it true your people built cities in zones where winds exceed 170 units per second? Aleks? Well, actually it swings pretty much all across the globe. And if you're referring to Florida, yeah, we rebuild the place probably once every 10 cycles or so. The people are just too stubborn to give up on the place, even though it's been entirely flooded by rising ocean tides nearly every other decade since. Well, since as long as we've been there, then unbelievable. I can see why they keep you on the board. Not many of us have even experienced anything close to the conditions on your home world, and I can hardly imagine what it's like to not only have a city flood, but to also rebuild it, knowing full well it will just be flooded again. Though I guess that is to be expected from a species which evolved on a Class 12. Aleks, technically, that classification is a bit off, but I do appreciate my opinions being considered for as infrequent as they are needed. Then again began assaulting Aleks with the shrill sounds of nails on a chalkboard. And I hardly think your world comes close to that of Class 11, given what little I know of it. Even just the two qualities you've made clear firmly place it as Class 12. Aleks, well, I wasn't implying Class 11. Technically speaking, Terra would be Class 13 if not for human intervention, and our actions in the last 100 cycles. When stopped and brought all three of her optical stokes over to look at Aleks, even unsure the Galactic Council knew what they were doing when they classified your world. Unsure they would have even considered lowering its score, if not for the cycle-set hurricanes and constant lightning storms. Aleks, well, honestly, they didn't believe us when we told them about Australia. And about the results we found when examining our ice cores. Terra actually goes through a 10,000 cycle-set global ice age, which our planet is supposed to currently be in. If not for our overuse of fossil fuels for the century and a half leading up to first contact, the permafrost was supposed to set in about now and stay for another 2,000 cycles before warming up again. That and the center of the Americas is located over a continent-size supervolcano. Our magnetic field flips entirely every few 1,000 cycles. Oh, and I'm serious. Everything about Australia is true. And then sun. They have the spiders, tiny, venomous arachnids that let out filaments of silk that catch the wind when they're first born and carries them up near the upper atmosphere. There they meet others of their kind and build vast flying islands of silk. They then eat a few unlucky birds themselves and the excess silk before growing larger and heavier, which causes them to start falling, blanketing, sometimes hundreds of units of land in spider-filled silk. Oh, and due to the winds in the upper atmosphere, they've made their way to nearly every part of the globe at one point or another, sometimes to fall on unsuspecting outdoor events. Honestly, I'd personally classify the planet as a Class 14, if for no other reason than that alone. Then looked at the human with abject terror. She'd known terror was Class 12, and she knew the basics for that classification. But what she was hearing here was beyond any reason beyond deadly. It took her a few seconds to compose herself before something else Aleks said caused her renewed and even deeper horror within Australia is real. Aleks couldn't help but chuckle at Ben's reaction. It was a common response he'd seen for many alien species when they learned about the true nature of terror. He decided to elaborate further, hoping to give Ben a more comprehensive understanding of his homeworld. Australia is just the tip of the iceberg. Then, let me tell you about some of the other delightful aspects of terror that the Galactic Council either didn't believe or chose to ignore in their classification. Biana's optical stokes quivered slightly, a mix of fear and curiosity evident in her posture. There's more. Aleks nodded, a wry smile playing on his lips. Much more. Let's start with our oceans, shall we? They cover about 71% of our planet's surface and are home to some of the most terrifying creatures you could imagine. We have fish that can swallow a human whole in the dairy, hands with tentacles that stretch for dozens of meters and contain enough venom to kill hundreds of people, and sharks that can smell a drop of blood from kilometers away. Events color change, slightly a sign of distress in their species. That sounds horrifying. How do people even venture into the water? Oh, we do more than venture. We have entire cities built underwater. And some of our favorite pastimes involve swimming, surfing, and diving. But let's move on to our land-based flora and fauna, shall we? Aleks began pacing the room, his excitement growing as he delved deeper into the subject. We have plants that can cause excruciating pain for months with a single touch, trees that explode during forest fires to spread their seeds, and fungi that can take over insect brains and turn them into zombies. Our wildlife includes bears that can run faster than humans and climb trees, eat cats that hunt in packs, and birds of prey that can spot a mouse from a kilometer high in the air. Events optical stokes. We're now fully focused on Aleks. Her earlier work forgotten. How did your species even survive to become sapient in such an environment? Aleks shrugged. Adaptability. I suppose we're not the strongest, fastest, or most venomous creatures on our planet, but we're incredibly resilient and resourceful. Which brings me to another point: our own biology. He held up his hand, examining it as if seeing it for the first time. Humans are endurance predators. We can't outrun most animals in a sprint, but we can outlast almost anything in a long-distance chase. We can sweat to regulate our body temperature, allowing us to keep moving long after other creatures have collapsed from heat exhaustion. Our immune systems are so robust that we can live symbiotically with countless microorganisms that would be lethal to many other species have been interjected for scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. But surely your planet must have some areas that are less deadly. Aleks laughed. Oh, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But even our safe areas have their own challenges. Take our polar regions, for instance. Temperatures can drop to -80 Celsius. Winds can reach speeds of 320 kilometers per hour, and the sun doesn't rise for months at a time. Yet, we've built research stations there and conduct scientific expeditions regularly. He paused, considering his next words carefully. But you know what's really fascinating? It's not just the natural world that makes terror so deadly. We humans have a knack for creating our own dangers. Even tilted her head, a gesture Aleks had come to recognize as confusion. What do you mean? Well, we've developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in the blink of an eye. We've created chemicals so toxic that a single drop can kill in seconds. We've engineered viruses and bacteria for medical research that, if released, could wipe out significant portions of our population. And yet we continue to push the boundaries of science and technology, always seeking to understand more to go further. Aleks noticed that Ven had begun to tremble slightly. He realized he might have gone too far and decided to lighten the mood. But it's not all doom and gloom. You know, all these challenges have made us incredibly adaptable. We can survive in almost any environment you throw at us. Heck, we even sent people to our moon just to see if we could do it. Ven's trembling subsided, slightly replaced by a look of all your moon. You mean you've achieved extraplanetary travel on your own? Oh yes, Aleks nodded enthusiastically. We've sent probes to every planet in our solar system, landed rovers on our neighboring planet, and we're currently working on plans for long-term habitation on other celestial bodies. Space, with all its radiation, lack of atmosphere, and extreme temperatures, that is just another frontier for us to conquer. He noticed Ven's optical stokes drooping slightly, a sign he recognized as mental fatigue. I'm sorry, then. I didn't mean to overwhelm you with all this information. It's just when you live on a world like Terror, you develop a certain perspective on what constitutes a challenge or a danger. Have been straightened herself, her color returning to normal. No, Aleks, this is enlightening. Terrifying. Yes, but enlightening. I think I understand now why you found Chris Tick's designs lacking compared to your home world. This biosphere must seem like a walk in the park. Aleks nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. Exactly. Don't get me wrong. I understand the need for gradual training. But if the goal is to prepare soldiers for survival on unknown, potentially hostile worlds, they need to be exposed to more extreme conditions. Events. Optical stokes swiveled towards the holographic display, still showing Chris Tick's designs. Perhaps we should reconsider some aspects of the biosphere. But Aleks, if what you say about terrorists is true, how do we even begin to replicate such conditions without putting our trainees in genuine peril? Aleks stroked his chin thoughtfully. That's a fair point. We don't want to traumatize the trainees or put them in real danger, but we can certainly ramp things up a bit. Let's start with the gravity. Instead of a constant 1.33 g, how about we implement variable gravity? We could have it fluctuate between 1.2 g and 1.5 g over the course of a day cycle. This would challenge the trainees' adaptability without pushing them to their physical limits. Even nodded, her optical stokes bobbing in agreement that could work. It would certainly make things more unpredictable for the trainees. Exactly. Aleks continued, warming to his theme. And let's talk about the weather. Instead of just light rain, why not introduce some more extreme weather patterns? We could have periods of intense heat followed by sudden torrential downpours, maybe even throw in some electrical storms, nothing too dangerous, but enough to keep the trainees on their toes. Then began inputting some of these suggestions into the holographic display. What about the wildlife? You mentioned that our current predators are inadequate. Aleks chuckled. To put it mildly. Look, I'm not suggesting we introduce anything as deadly as some of terrorists' apex predators, but we could certainly make things more challenging. How about a pack-hunting species that uses basic tactics, or a camouflage expert that can blend seamlessly with its environment? We want to train the soldiers to always be alert to expect the unexpected. As they continue to brainstorm, Aleks found himself getting more and more excited. This was why he had taken this job in the first place, the opportunity to share his unique perspective, to help create environments that could genuinely prepare people for the challenges of unknown worlds. After a couple of hours of intense discussion and planning, the holographic display showed a markedly different biosphere design. The terrain was more varied, with steep cliffs, dense forests, and treacherous swamps. The weather patterns were more extreme and unpredictable. The wildlife, while not as deadly as terrorists' most dangerous creatures, presented a much more significant challenge than Chris Take's original designs. When looked at their work with a mix of awe and trepidation, this is quite something, Aleks. But do you think Chris Tage will approve these changes? It's a significant departure from the original plan. Aleks shrugged. He might resist at first, but I think once we explain the reasoning behind each change, he'll come around. After all, the goal here is to create the most effective training environment possible, right? Just then, the door to the conference room slid open, and Chris Tage scuttled back in. He paused, his compound eyes to working in the altered holographic display. What is the meaning of this? Chris Hicks' voice was a mix of surprise and annoyance. What have you done to my designs? Aleks stepped forward, ready to explain. But to his surprise, Ven spoke up first. Lead engineer Chris Tage, civil consultant, Alabama X, has provided some enlightening information about his home world. We believe these modifications will create a more effective training environment for our soldiers. Chris Hicks and 10A twitched irritably. More effective? My designs were perfectly adequate. What could a civilian possibly know about military training needs? Aleks cleared his throat with all due respect. Lead engineer, while I may not be a military expert, I am intimately familiar with surviving in extreme environments. The original design, while challenging by some standards, would not adequately prepare soldiers for the conditions they might face on truly hostile worlds. Chris Take's compound eyes swiveled towards Aleks. And I suppose you think your home world is the standard by which all hostile environments should be measured. Not at all, Aleks replied calmly. Terror is an extreme case, I'll admit, but the principles of survival remain the same whether you're dealing with a Class 10 world or a Class 14. Adaptability, constant vigilance, expecting the unexpected. These are the skills we need to instill in the trainees. Chris Take remained silent for a moment, his antennae twitching as he processed this information. Finally, he spoke. Show me these changes. Explain your reasoning. For the next hour, Aleks and Ven walked Chris Take through each modification they had made to the biosphere design. They explained the variable gravity system, the more extreme and unpredictable weather patterns, and the new, more challenging wildlife. Aleks drew on his experiences on Terra, providing real-world examples of how these conditions could manifest and the skills needed to survive them. To their surprise, Chris Take listened attentively, occasionally asking for clarification or more details as they finished their presentation, and uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Finally, Chris Tage spoke. I must admit your arguments are compelling. While I still believe my original designs were adequate for their intended purpose, I can see the value in these modifications. He paused, his compound eyes fixed on Aleks. However, I have one question, civil consultant Aleks. If your world is truly as deadly as you claim, How do you explain your species' survival, let alone its technological advancement? Aleks smiled. It was a question he had been asked many times before. That's an excellent question. Lead engineer. The answer, I believe, lies in the very nature of our species. Humans are above all else adaptable. We've evolved to survive and thrive in a wide range of environments, from the frozen tundra to scorching deserts. But more than that, we're problem solvers. Every challenge our world has thrown at us, we found a way to overcome. He gestured towards the holographic display. To take this biosphere, for example. Yes, it's more challenging than the original design. But I have no doubt that with proper training, your soldiers will not only survive in this environment, but learn to thrive in it. They'll develop new skills, new ways of thinking, new approaches to problem solving. And isn't that the ultimate goal of any training program? Chris Teig was silent for a long moment, his antennae twitching thoughtfully. Then, to everyone's surprise, he made a sound that Aleks recognized as the Zophony equivalent of a chuckle. Well argued, civil consultant. Very well. We will proceed with these modifications. However, he added, his tone becoming serious. I will be monitoring the training sessions closely. If these changes proved too extreme or detrimental to our soldiers' well-being, we will revert to a more moderate design. Is that understood? Aleks nodded, relief and excitement coursing through him. Absolutely, lead engineer. Thank you for your consideration. As Chris Teig left the room to inform the rest of the team about the changes, then turned to Aleks, her optical stokes quivering with what he had come to recognize as excitement. That was incredible. Aleks, I've never seen Chris Teig change his mind like that. But there's something I still don't understand. Earlier you said Terror would be classified as a Class 13 or even 14 Deathworld. Yet, the Galactic Council has it listed as Class 12. Why the discrepancy? Aleks' expression turned thoughtful. Well, that's a bit of a complex issue. You see, when the Galactic Council first assessed Terror, they based their classification on the planet's natural conditions, the varied climates, the extreme weather, the diverse and often deadly flora and fauna. And by those standards alone, Terror is indeed a solid cluster wealth. He paused, considering his next words carefully. But what the Council didn't fully account for, or perhaps chose to overlook, is the impact of human activity on our planet. Over the centuries, we've altered our environment in ways that have made it even more extreme events. Optical stokes tilted in curiosity. You mean you've made your world more dangerous? Intentionally. Aleks shook his head. Not intentionally, no. It's more of a side effect of our technological progress and population growth. We've changed our planet's climate, leading to more extreme weather events. We've created vast urban areas that pose their own unique survival challenges. We've developed technologies and industries that, while advancing our civilization, have also introduced new dangers to our environment. He sighed, a hint of sadness in his voice. And then there's the potential for global catastrophe that we've introduced. Nuclear weapons, biological agents, artificial intelligence. These are all human creations that could, in theory, pose an existential threat not just to our species, but to all life on Terror. Ins' color paled slightly. That's terrifying. How do you live with such constant danger? Aleks smiled ruefully. Honestly, most of the time, we don't think about it. We go about our daily lives, focusing on our immediate concerns, our jobs, our families, our personal goals. It's only when you step back and look at the bigger picture that you realize just how precarious our existence really is. He gestured towards the holographic display of the biosphere. But that's why projects like this are so important. By preparing for the worst, by constantly challenging ourselves and expanding our capabilities, we increase our chances of survival, not just as individuals, but as a species. Then was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then she asked, Do you think other species could survive on Terror? Aleks considered the question with proper preparation and support. Probably. It would be challenging, no doubt, but not impossible. In fact, He added with a grin, "I think this biosphere project could be a first step towards that goal. By creating environments that simulate some of terrorist challenges, we're not just training soldiers, we're potentially paving the way for greater interspecies understanding and cooperation." Event's color brightened, a sign of excitement. "That's a fascinating perspective. Aleks, I hadn't considered the broader implications of our work here." As they continue to discuss the potential applications of their modified biosphere design, Aleks felt a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't often that he got to share his unique perspective on survival and adaptation. And who knew, maybe this project would indeed be the first step towards a greater understanding between species. As they wrapped up their discussion and prepared to present their finalized designs to the rest of the team, Aleks couldn't help but smile. Terror might be a deadly world by galactic standards, but it had produced a species capable of not just surviving, but thriving in the face of constant challenges. And now, through projects like this, they had the opportunity to share that resilience with the rest of the galaxy. In the end, perhaps that was Terra's greatest gift to the galactic community, not its resources or its biodiversity, but the hard-won wisdom of a species that had evolved on a world that seemed determined to kill them at every turn. It's a species that had not only survived, but had turned those challenges into the very fuel of their progress and innovation. As Aleks and Ven left the conference room, ready to face whatever new challenges awaited them, one thing was certain: the galaxy was about to get a taste of what it truly meant to be Terran, and it was going to be one wild ride. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of Earth's dangers and wonders. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on more incredible stories from the frontier of science fiction. See you next time on Sci-Fi Humanity.